Buckle up, folks, because we're about to take a wild ride through the captivating saga of the Kingdom of Kush. And let me tell you, it's anything but boring. Picture this, we're talking about not one, but two epic kingdoms that rose from the sands of Sudan. The first one, way back between 2000 and 1500 BC, was like the Las Vegas Strip of ancient trade and innovation. I'm talking about a bustling hub where merchants from all corners of the earth rubbed elbows and ideas flew faster than a supersonic jet. Despite often being overshadowed by its Egyptian neighbors to the north, the Kingdom of Kush was actually a pretty big deal in Africa for a long time. We're talking over 1,000 years of regional power here. Fast forward to the Second Kingdom of Kush, and things get even juicier. We're talking about pyramids, Egyptian style, but with a Kushite twist. And let's not forget the political power plays and cultural shakedowns that made this kingdom the talk of the ancient world. From rivalries with neighboring states to epic feats of engineering, the Kingdom of Kush was like the Avengers of the ancient world, minus the spandex, of course. So, next time you think history is just a snooze fest, remember the Kingdom of Kush. Kerma, the first Kingdom of Kush. Now let's dive headfirst into the ancient wonders of the first Kingdom of Kush, also known as Kerma. Now, when I say ancient, I mean we're talking some seriously old-school vibes here. Imagine this, way back in the day, before iPhones and TikTok, there was this incredible kingdom nestled in the heart of Africa. And it was not just any kingdom, it was one of the oldest African states out there, second only to Egypt itself. Kerma popped up around 2400 BC, right smack dab in the middle of the Egyptian Old Kingdom. Kerma Kush was like the rock star of ancient kingdoms, hitting its peak between 1750 and 1500 BC. We're talking about the classical Kerma era, when Kush was firing on all cylinders. And get this, while Egypt was going through a bit of a rough patch, Kerma Kush was thriving like never before. Just when Egypt was at its weakest during the Second Intermediate period from 1650 to 1500 BC, Kerma was thriving like never before and stealing the show. It's like they say, when one kingdom's down, another's on the rise, and Kerma Kush wasn't about to miss its moment in the spotlight. During this era, Kush was like the Wall Street of ancient times, rolling in gold and trading like there's no tomorrow. Picture this, gold mines as far as the eye can see, and trade routes buzzing with activity. All that trading wasn't just for fun, it was generating serious wealth and power for Kush. It's like they say, where there's gold, there's power, and Kush was swimming in both. But as we already know from our history lessons, things never stay the same for long. The good times didn't last for Kush. Just when things were looking golden for Kush, along came Egypt's 18th dynasty, ready to rain on their parade. Once the Egyptians reorganized under the new kingdom, they wasted no time in fighting back against their neighbors in Kush. In 1500 BC, along came Thutmose, or Thutmosis, the third new kingdom's pharaoh, strutting onto the scene like he owns the place. And guess what? He decides he's had enough of Kerma's shenanigans and throws them right out of the ring. That's right, Kerma gets knocked down, and all of their lands fall right into the lap of the Egyptians. And that's how the recovery of a united Egypt with the 18th dynasty, starting from 1550 to 1295 BC, spelled the end for this Bronze Age powerhouse of the Kingdom of Kush. It's like something out of a Shakespearean tragedy, two kingdoms locked in a battle for supremacy, and only one could come out on top. And spoiler alert, it wasn't Kush. When the Egyptians seized control over Kerma, they even created a brand spanking new job title, the Viceroy of Kush. Just to show Kerma who's boss, Egypt governed Nubia like it's its own little kingdom, splitting it into two parts, Wawat and Kush. Talk about a power move, am I right? And that's how the cookie crumbled for Kerma, signaling the end of an era. By 1450 BC, Egypt had conquered all of Kush. The Second Kingdom of Kush. Now, let's dive into the juicy bits of the Second Kingdom of Kush. As Egyptian influence in Nubia began to wane, those viceroys of Kush, who were originally just appointed governors, started to flex their muscles a bit more. And by the 11th century BC, they were basically calling the shots as independent kings. Quite the plot twist, right? By the time the Egyptian Third Intermediate Period came around, a brand spanking new Kushite kingdom had emerged on the scene. By 730 BC, the Second Kingdom of Kush had conquered Egypt, right up to the shores of the Mediterranean. Can you believe it? The Kushite pharaoh Pir, with a reign that lasted from around 752 to 722 BC, even went on to become the first pharaoh of Egypt's 25th dynasty, the so-called Black Pharaohs. Pir died in 715 BC, having reigned 35 years. Although he had returned to Nubia after conquering Egypt, he wished to be buried in the Egyptian style, a request his subjects granted. Entombed in a pyramid, Pir was the first pharaoh in more than 500 years to be buried this way. By the time the Second Kingdom of Kush was establishing itself, war and contact with Egypt had already shaped Kush culture. This Second Kingdom of Kush erected pyramids, worshipped many Egyptian gods, and called its rulers pharaohs. But here's the kicker: while they worshipped many of the same Egyptian gods and even called their rulers pharaohs, their art and architecture still had that distinct Nubian flair. The 25th dynasty would last for 3/4 of a century. But like many empires, its reign ended in turmoil. Its reign ended in turmoil when an Assyrian invasion of Egypt caused it to fall from power. The Assyrians didn't just defeat the Kush militarily, they also struck their names from monuments, destroyed their statues, and erased their legacy from history. After their defeat, the Nubians retreated to Napata only to face further aggression at the hands of Pharaoh Psamtik II from the 26th dynasty. After being kicked out by Pharaoh Psamtik II, they packed up again, but this time, they headed south to Meroe, which was situated farther south along the Nile. This move wasn't just about finding a new home, it was a calculated choice. Meroe was like the perfect spot, right in the middle of all these important trade routes and caravan trails. Plus, the land there was amazing, super fertile and packed with iron and gold mines. So, they set up shop, started smelting gold like nobody's business, and pretty soon, Meroe became the place to be if you wanted to be somebody in ancient Nubia. Kush prospered for centuries, when Queen Cleopatra died in 30 BC. But, Kush started to crumble yet again after a while. Eventually, after years of hardship, Meroe became completely abandoned in the 4th century AD. So, what is the Kush kingdom mainly remembered for? 1. Definitely its gold. You know what the Egyptians loved about Kush? Gold. And boy, did Kush have a lot of it. Gold was like their ticket to wealth, especially through trade with Egypt. Kushite craftsmen were like magicians, turning that shiny metal into all sorts of amazing stuff, jewelry, artifacts, you name it. They even blinged out their temples and statues with gold leaf, making everything sparkle like crazy. And get this, all that gold wasn't just for show. It was their ticket to wealth and power. See, they were smart about it. They traded their gold for all sorts of goodies, and that gave them serious influence, especially in Egypt. But it wasn't just about shiny treasures. Kush was like this mysterious land full of riches and secrets. The Egyptians couldn't get enough of it. They were fascinated by everything, those towering pyramids, those fancy temples, and all those cool rituals. It was like stepping into a whole new world for them. And you know what's even cooler? They didn't just trade goods, they swapped ideas and stories too. It was like a cultural exchange that made both Egypt and Kush richer in more ways than one. This prosperity in trade and gold attracted foreign envy and was, unfortunately, among the main reasons it was conquered in 1500 BCE by the new Kingdom of Egypt. Something else the Nubian kingdom was famous for? The female kings of ancient Kush. One of the coolest things about Meroitic civilization was the fierce queens running the show. While Egypt's Cleopatra and Hatshepsut are household names today, by ancient Egyptian standards, few people have heard of Nubia's mighty queens. Before around 284 BCE, only kings held sway over Kush. But then came along King Ergamenes, or as some folks call him, Arkamani I, who ruled from 295 to 275 BCE. Now, this king wasn't just about keeping things status quo. He shook things up with a series of reforms. And you know what's one of the coolest changes he made? He elevated royal women to the prestigious position of queen. One such queen was a queen called Candace, who signed a peace treaty with the Emperor Augustus. Candace, in fact, means Queen Mother or Queen Regent, and was the title given to Kushite queens. But Queen Candace's influence didn't stop at treaties and diplomacy. She's even mentioned in the Bible when the Apostle Philip met a eunuch of great authority under her reign who converted him to Christianity. You can find this mentioned in Acts chapter 8, verses 27 to 39. Another well-known queen in Meroe was Queen Amanirenas, the Nubian queen who fought back Caesar's army. Amanirenas ruled during the reign of Cleopatra in Egypt and Mark Antony in Rome, until they were deposed in 30 BC by Augustus Caesar. From 25 to 21 BC, Amanirenas, queen or Candake of the Kingdom of Kush, managed to do what many male leaders in her time could not. She pushed back a Roman invasion. Under Queen Amanirenas' command, some 30,000 soldiers of the ancient Kingdom of Kush, located in modern-day Sudan, took to arms and fought back Roman invaders who had advanced from Egypt. Queen Amanirenas was succeeded by yet another powerful queen known as Amanishakheto, who ruled during the early 1st century AD. Sadly, in the 1830s, an Italian soldier turned dangerous treasure hunter known as Giuseppe Fellini descended upon Meroe like a modern-day pirate hunting for treasure. His eyes were set on the legendary riches of Queen Amanishakheto. And you know what's even more heartbreaking? Fellini succeeded. Almost all of Queen Amanishaketo's precious jewels, ornaments, and other royal belongings were plundered by this ruthless treasure hunter. But wait, it gets worse. Fellini didn't just stop at robbing the queen's treasures. He went on a rampage, raiding and demolishing a number of pyramids, leaving behind a trail of destruction. Now, when Fellini returned home in 1836, he thought he'd hit the jackpot. He tried to sell off the loot, thinking he'd make a fortune. But guess what? Nobody believed him. They couldn't fathom that such exquisite jewelry could have been crafted in sub-Saharan Africa. And so, Queen Amanishaketo's treasures, once the pride of Kush, were cast into doubt and obscurity, lost to history's shadows. So in the end, what happened to Kush? In the end, despite their massive pyramids, all that gold, and their impressive power, Kush didn't last forever. As Egypt flexed its muscles and expanded during the New Kingdom period, Kush began to lose its grip. Slowly but surely, their kingdom started to crumble. By the end of the 16th century BC, Kush had faded away into history, overshadowed by the might of Egypt. It's like they say, even the mightiest empires have their time in the sun before the sands of time catch up with them. Well, there we have it. That wraps up our journey through the captivating history of the Kingdom of Kush. Thank you all for joining me on this adventure. Before we part ways, I have one question for you. What aspect of Kushite history fascinated you the most? I hope you learned something new today and that you'll continue to explore the fascinating history of Africa. We've got to do everything to keep African history alive. So share this with a friend. Until next time, stay curious, stay adventurous, and see you in the next chapter.